All right, hey everyone. This is Sean Williams with the Williams team at Remax Premier Properties, and we are coming to you today on the cusp of spring. It's a beautiful day out today. I know my grass is growing. I need to cut it very soon, and we're getting calls from people wanting to buy and sell houses like crazy right now. We all know the springtime is when things really ramp up, which it's hard to believe it's going to ramp up any more than it is. One of the things that we want to talk about today, real briefly, is just about appraisals. And I know that doesn't sound very sexy, but it is something we have been battling with a lot over the past 12 months. And really, just within the past, couple months, it's gotten really bad as uh, buyers are just fighting over homes. It's become crazy and prices are going up like crazy. So naturally, we have some appraisal issues. So we're going to talk about that today and what that means and how to navigate through that process in case you find yourself in the middle of an appraisal issue, whether you're on the buyer side or seller side, and what your options are. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Chris, and he's going to tell us a little bit, just kind of a general overview about what appraisals are, what their purpose is, and kind of how it works contractually.
Yeah, so without getting too in depth with it, basically appraisals are required by lenders if you're doing a lender financing, and this is just basically to protect the lender. With the way prices are going nowadays, things are going 15, 20, even more than that over asking, and the buyer can put a contract on that, but at the end of the day, if it's not going to appraise for that, the lender doesn't want to take on that loan because if things fall apart, then they have to try to get that money back later on down the road if the buyer ends up not being able to pay for it. It's not required for cash buys, but it could be part of the contract. And the way the contract's written now, if it appraises for less than the contract price, the buyer has the ability to walk unless the buyer and seller agree upon the buyer coming up with the difference in the appraisal or the sellers coming down in the contract price.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if the blender's putting up majority of the money on a property, they want to make sure if things go south that what they essentially might own is worth at least what the buyer's paying for it. So it's really just a protection process for the lender. And of course, like you said, if it doesn't appraise the way the contract's written without any other edits or revisions to it, the buyer has that ability to walk. So with that being said, as we're working in this market right now, Katie, what's happening? What are you seeing?
So lots of demand and low inventory. So with that being said, the prices are being bid up, like Chris said, 15, 20, even more than 20,000 over ask, which is great. But as a seller, when you review an offer, price isn't always everything because you have the appraisal at the end of the process. So unless that appraisal is waived, you need to go back and look at, okay, so we're 15,000 over. How much does the buyer have to bring to closing, or how much are they putting down? What do their finances look like? Are they able to help if the appraisal comes in low? Because just because they offer this much doesn't mean that's what you're going to end at if there's no finances to be able to make up for the difference. But as a buyer, if you're putting in an offer, if you're able to waive an appraisal contingency, you can make your offer that much stronger to a seller. But if you do that, just make sure that you have the funds to be able to make up if that appraisal comes in short.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's why sellers a lot of times like cash, even if the price isn't quite as high, because they can just totally avoid that appraisal contingency in most instances. But most buyers don't have cash. So if you don't, an option that you have is you can waive that appraisal contingency if you understand the risk that if it doesn't appraise for your contract price, you're going to be obligated at that point to bring the difference as cash. So if you got some little bit extra cash in the bank, it may be a good tactic to use when submitting an offer to get a seller's attention. Stephanie, you've been quiet over there. What are you going to do if an appraisal comes in low? Whether you're on the buy side or sell side, if both parties want to make this work, what are your options when it comes in low?
There's a few options. The first one is usually trying to renegotiate. I mean, everything becomes negotiable at that point. You know, whether you had agreed with the sellers to pay closing costs for the buyers. I mean, a whole contract can be renegotiated. The main thing that's renegotiated is, hey, sellers, are you willing to come down to the appraised value and let me buy the house for the appraised value? You know, in this market, sellers are seeing that so many people want their house and they feel like, why should I have to come down to the appraised value when I had 10 people write me an offer? It doesn't really sit well. So another thing that you can do between the buyers and the sellers, the listing agent can dispute the appraised value. That's a process that you go through with the buyer's lender. There's a formal document that you can submit stating, hey, we think that the property should be this price, and here's why. Here's some properties that have sold around the property under contract that, you know, are equal to this. And, you know, maybe on the appraisal, maybe the appraiser missed something. I mean, they're so busy. Maybe they missed a bedroom, or maybe they missed a bathroom, or maybe they counted the square footage wrong. You know, there's so many little factors in there that could have caused the appraisal to come back low. Now, usually there's really not one answer to this. I mean, we've seen appraisers change the appraised value, especially if they miss something. But if they feel like the price they put on there is right, you know, there's not a whole lot you can do at that point besides, buyer, do you have any extra money, like Katie and Chris were saying, to throw down to make that price, you know, the contract price, or do you want to walk away? If both sides of the party, the buyer and seller, are willing to take the risk of the buyer moving to another lender and potentially getting a new appraisal, that's another option.
Yeah, I mean, appraisers are human. They make mistakes. The unfortunate part about that kind of more or less formal dispute process is the judge is the jury, right? So you're asking the person that appraised it low to kind of reevaluate things. And unfortunately, most times, unless they grossly miss something, they're not going to change things. Maybe just a little bit, but not a lot of time. So it is challenging. It is an uphill battle. I'll give you a quick example of one I'm kind of dealing with right now without giving too many specifics. But essentially, the property appraised for $45,000 less than our contract price. And it's actually about the same price that my seller paid like 7 or 8 years ago. So naturally, the first thing I did was ask for a copy of the appraisal. I want to review what the appraiser said was the comparable comps. Sometimes you can look at those and go, well, look, you know, it's hard to argue with what they're saying, but more times than not, you might be able to find some errors. I have found errors with square footage or bedrooms and baths, things of that nature. But on this particular appraisal, they were using comps that were more than 3 miles away for a property that I knew had comps within walking distance. And the comps, the feel, the location, the neighborhood were totally different. So it blew my mind that the appraiser would even consider these other properties as comparable. So naturally, I thought it was a slam dunk. I provided the lender with the comps that I used to price the property. And sure enough, the appraiser didn't like it. So in this scenario, the seller would like to go ahead and move forward with putting the property back on the market. However, the buyer is willing to get another lender and hopefully get another appraisal where the appraiser has a little bit more, I guess, common sense in that scenario. So we'll have to see what happens with that, but these things do happen and you got to work through it. So with that being said, I kind of want to open it up to you all before we close out. I know you all have been battling with some appraisal issues yourself. Do you all have any specific advice or scenarios that you have found yourself in that you might want to share?
You know, just like you all were saying earlier, one of the main things is if you have any extra money to bring to the table, I mean, that's been huge in helping us get offers accepted. I know that's a lot to ask of buyers, you know, when you're already, you know, waiving your inspections and, you know, paying your own closing costs and doing everything you can. But, you know, like, it's just, that's something that would really, really helps get offers accepted.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I had one a few weeks ago come in. I think it was 9,000 less than what I was representing the buyers. And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to good communication with both parties. I mean, you know, you can come up with the funds, but if you have good communication throughout the whole process, it could work in the buyer's favor, not have to come up with the difference and, you know, mutually agree upon the lower price.
Now, that's a great point. I mean, at the end of the day, it's there to protect the buyer. And heck, especially in this market, if you can get the seller to come down and agree to move forward with things because they don't want to start that process over, that's a win. And I think you make a great point that it's really hinges on the communication between both parties and everyone working in good faith to try to keep the deal together. So unfortunately, that's not always the case, but you make a great point that $9,000 isn't insurmountable, right? You can figure out a way to make that work. 45,000 in my scenario, well, that's a whole nother challenge. So, Katie, you have any other closing thoughts?
I think just doing your due diligence from the very beginning is going to help the whole process from start to finish just be easier. And that just goes back to what Chris said in communication, asking those questions up front, making sure looking at the finances the buyer is that the buyer has, and then just having that conversation if the appraisal comes in low and what you all can work out to keep the deal together.
For sure. For sure. That's what we're trying to do, is keep things moving in the right direction for everyone. So with that being said, we're going to close this thing out. And obviously, you know, we wish you the best with any transactions you may have. And we're always here to help if you run into any appraisal issues. Catch you later.